Tonight, Hamas says it's agreed to release 10 hostages as part of ceasefire negotiations. That's as the Israeli Prime Minister continues talks in Washington and appears to suggest he's ready for peace. Also coming up,
will you do a deal on migration, Mr. President?
the UK and France agree a new deterrent to stop smuggling gangs. But can there be a deal that doesn't anger southern Europe? French police could be told to do more to intercept boats in shallow water.
They can give me an opportunity, to succeed or to do whatever that I need to do in my life. I can go to school.
But will that be enough? We asked migrants in a camp in Dunkirk why the pull of the UK is so strong. And we'll report from Marseilles, where residents say they've had a lucky escape. But officials warn there'll be more dangerous wildfires this summer. Plus, more than 700 drones and a dozen missiles launched at Ukraine overnight, hours after Donald Trump expressed frustration with Vladimir Putin. And England beat the Netherlands to keep their Euro hopes alive. But can Wales do the same against France? That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We started the week talking about the prospect of a ceasefire in Gaza. And last night, Sky sources suggested Israel and Hamas were moving closer to an agreement, except for one sticking point. And it's a big one. Where will Israeli forces remain in Gaza after any ceasefire is declared? And crucially, for how long?
First comes strength, then comes the peace. And we hope we'll realize the fruits of strength very soon, in peace.
That was Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was saying peace through strength, according to him. He's holding almost daily talks in Washington with Donald Trump, all whilst parallel negotiations take place in Qatar. The US president is still hopeful of substantial progress this week.
But I think we have a chance this week or next week. Not definitely. There's nothing definite about war and Gaza and all of the other places that we all deal with so much. But there's a very good chance that we'll have a settlement, an agreement of some kind this week and maybe next week, if not.
And in the past hour, Hamas says it has agreed to release 10 hostages, though the timeline is unclear. Let's just bring in our international correspondent, John Sparks, who joins us from Washington. And John, we keep being told that they're closer and closer to some kind of ceasefire deal. And there seems to be these small sticking points, almost like we've been here before.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely right, Yalda. I think this week the US has presented a version of reality that they are getting closer and closer to a ceasefire deal, that the momentum is building. And I think the presence of the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in Washington has lent itself to that. I mean, he will have been, by the time he's finished, he will have been here for 4 days. And that means that Trump, and they've had several meetings already, he's been able to put personal pressure on him. He's been able to do it in the face. And you know what? Netanyahu owes him, right? The Americans came in during the attack on Iran with their high-tech bombers and their big munitions. So Netanyahu owes the Americans. But there do seem to be issues here that they are really struggling to solve. And it has been reported here that a Qatari interlocutor was in the White House for meetings yesterday evening that have been described as tense and difficult. And those were about the withdrawal of Israeli forces, the IDF. How far would they withdraw to in event of a ceasefire deal, in event of an agreement being reached? Those discussions were very difficult. It has been reported eventually the Israelis came back with a new map showing a wider area that they would be prepared to withdraw to. Again, we then thought, right, new momentum. We've got new momentum here, but then we moved to today, and Trump, he was meeting with 5 African leaders. He was asked about the Gaza ceasefire, and as we've heard, he said, maybe this week, maybe next week, but it's difficult. It didn't feel like they're on the verge of an agreement. And then we have had a statement released by Hamas tonight, and I'm going to read a little bit of that for you. In this statement, Hamas have said In its keenness to succeed in the ongoing efforts, the movement has shown the necessary flexibility and agreed to release 10 prisoners. Now, I do think that is significant. They say they're agreeing to release 10 prisoners if there is a deal. That's up from 8. That's up from 8 hostages. They go on to say the key points remain under negotiation. Foremost among them, the flow of aid, the withdrawal of the occupation from the territories of the Gaza Strip, that's Israeli soldiers, and the provision of real guarantees for a permanent ceasefire. I'll go on. Despite the difficulty of negotiations on these issues, so far, due to the occupation's intransigence, they're referring to the Israelis there, we continue to work seriously and with a positive spirit. So, I mean, the Americans have been saying 3 of 4 issues have been solved. There we've got Hamas raising more than one issue there. It does seem like there is a long way to go. Netanyahu is here. He'll be here until tomorrow evening. I think the Americans would like to have something to announce while he is here. But I think we're witnessing a different reality here, Yalda. This is a different reality that is much more difficult. We are looking ultimately at a very difficult problem to solve. The Israelis, Netanyahu has promised, he has pledged to eliminate Hamas in its entirety. Hamas is committed to ensuring its existence. That is a very difficult problem to solve for the interlocutors, for the Americans, the Qataris, the Egyptians. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, it feels very much like we've been here before. Thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, let's bring in now UNICEF spokesperson James Elder. James, really good to see you. We often speak when you're either in Gaza or somewhere else in the Middle East, trying to get much-needed aid to all of the desperate people who need it. But just on the talk of ceasefire, I mean, our correspondent there laid it out, just how difficult this whole process is. We're 21 months into this war now, or whatever you want to call it. And frankly, it doesn't feel like we are any closer to reaching the end of this.
No, yeah, and it's really problematic too to hear this idea that aid flows if there's a ceasefire. I mean, the idea that mums and dads and children are being denied the most basics for survival, and we are talking the most basics for survival. We're talking water, we're talking food, we're talking hygiene kits, we're talking medicines. The idea that is tied to a ceasefire is deeply problematic. And under any sense of international law, under any sense of decency for a population under bombardment, they need the basics for survival. So that should not be held to as part of a deal that we're waiting for. And every other aspect, of course, we want to see a ceasefire. Mums and dads want to promise their children they'll go to bed and wake up. Mums in Israel want their sons to go home who are hostages living somewhere. It ticks every single box. As we saw, Yalda, just a couple of months ago, humanitarian aid has to do a couple of things. It has to go to where people need it, and you have to look at the evidence to make sure that aid is ensuring malnutrition drops and access to water increases. That's what happened in the ceasefire. 400 distribution points. That's not what's happening now. We are now seeing this horrible collision in a child's body of a lack of food, a lack of water, and that is a lethal mix for girls and boys beyond what happens day after day from the sky.
Yeah, absolutely horrific, some of the stories that you've told us in the past. You were in Gaza about 3 weeks ago and you told us a story of a young boy who was killed trying to get aid. And frankly, this is now a daily occurrence for dozens of people trying to get food. I was told by someone, you arrive at the aid distribution point early and you risk getting killed. You arrive late, you risk getting killed. You arrive on time, you risk getting killed.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that we have seen something set up that is worse than anyone's possible scenario, and it's making humanitarian aid, the access, making it much more difficult. It's an incredibly dangerous place for children, for anyone to try and seek aid. And Yalda, there's a lot of times people will say, look, can't the UN do something? This seems like it's there to stay. Can't the UN do something? The simple fact is that, firstly, we had a very good system in place, and that was, 400 distribution points. The other thing is that because this site is alongside a militarised zone. People have to go through a militarised zone. If an organisation like UNICEF says, OK, well, we want to try and support and we'll put hygiene kits there or water there or something, then you are still pushing people down a militarised zone. And the next time there is a mass casualty event, which will be tomorrow or the next day, then we've been a party to that. So firstly, under no circumstances can we push people into where there are soldiers. And of course, on the other side, it's not about, isn't it better than nothing? Because it's a false equivalent. There was not nothing. There was 400 distribution points. UNICEF was going door to door. So it's a dangerous setup for people on the ground. It's horrific, the idea that you are being starved somewhere and then scrambling to survive and shot at. And at the same time, Yalda, it's a terribly dangerous precedent. There are other, wars around the world where groups will look and go, oh, so we don't need the United Nations. We can choose who we give food to. That should worry world leaders and member states. But too many member states have been unconcerned by grave violations against children in Gaza.
Talk us through the fact that, you, as you say, were in Gaza. Are your aid trucks able to get in? I mean, obviously, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a group, a body newly formed, created by Israel and the United States, and you have criticised the process, as have up to 170 other aid agencies. But in terms of what you guys are doing currently in Gaza, are you able to get some trucks in? Are you still able to have these distribution points?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So yes, in part, and I was lucky enough. Part of my work never leaves you. The sense of seeing wounds of war on girls and boys, seeing a little girl talking to her who's paralysed, little Jenna, and her explaining to me in her own voice as she lay there paralysed after an airstrike on her school at 7 o'clock in the morning while brushing her teeth, lying there watching her friend die. Those images, those sounds will never leave me. But Yalda, I also see distribution points. I see grandmothers and mothers with malnourished children getting that therapeutic food from UNICEF, and that is an utter inspiration. But we know it's not nearly enough. There's no way we are getting enough trucks in. Right now, it's around 1 to 5% of the trucks going in. There is enough food on the border of Israel to feed 1 million people for 4 months. So again,
and it's just sitting there.
It's just sitting there. And these denials, we cannot normalise this. We can't normalise this idea that a population is deprived of food. Yes, you will hear arguments all the time of looting and aid diversion, and we should talk about those. Looting, very clearly, looting happens when there is mass deprivation. And, if a portion of London received nothing apart from bombs for 2.5 months and then, down a certain street they allowed a few trucks, there would be looting because there'd be, people are desperate. During the ceasefire.
And this idea that Hamas is weaponising the aid as well, accessing it, and as you say, there are accusations from the Israeli side that criminal elements are there as well. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really important. So that aid diversion, UNICEF has asked time and again, just for the evidence, show us the evidence. We're a last mile distributor, and what that means is that we follow the aid, the vaccine into a child's arm, the food into a child's mouth. We have third-party monitors. This is not the first war zone we've worked in which has a lack of law and order. At no point have we been shown the evidence. At no point. Now, beyond the evidence, there's logic. OK, so all this aid diversion that allegedly from Hamas with no evidence, but what about hygiene kits for women? What about tents and shelters? What about oxygen? What about incubators? We've got incubators that are on the wrong side of the border, and pregnant mums who give birth because they are stressed and having premature babies, those children are dying. So that's food, but then you look at water. We are at the most critical level we've ever been in terms of water. But water goes from the source to a recipient. There's no middle person, so how on earth can there possibly be a justification to have a level of deprivation of water to ensure that every single person in Gaza is below an emergency threshold?
And what is that then leading to? Because, of course, there have been warnings about diseases and things like meningitis for the longest time. The last time we spoke, and you just come out of Gaza, you spoke about the issue of water and meningitis, for example. Yes,
well, it's a really pertinent point, Yalda. So right now, as of today and yesterday, we're seeing very worrying spikes in meningitis. Polio is still active in the water system, we see in the tests. So they are two very, very lethal diseases that should worry everyone. Cholera, we've seen no cholera outbreak. If we see a cholera outbreak, then, the level of child mortality that we see from the skies, from the bombardment, can be matched. These things are all, again, utterly preventable. The access to food, the access to water is political. It's not logistical. And yet, as I talk of this and think of the idea of how many children are at risk, I realise that as we talk nutrition and water, still this idea that, a girl and boy are killed every single hour since the horrors of October 7, every single hour. So in the last 7 days, 168 children. The idea that that doesn't have member states up in arms and just saying enough, at what point can we keep throwing international humanitarian law out the door? But that's where we are, a girl and boy, a mum, an auntie, a dad, grieving over that child, as we said, that little 13-year-old boy who I will never forget because his dad was in tears as this boy bravely told his story, and his mum furious with this medical evacuation form, knowing that it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, as her little boy, this brave boy Yalda, who sat up and held my arm because he wanted to tell his story, that dignity of a 13-year-old. Those children are dying as you and I speak. It's utterly pointless, and it continues.
Are you hopeful this is going to come to an end anytime soon? And what more do you think the international community could have frankly done over the course of the last 20 months, which they haven't done?
Yeah, it's a great question. Am I hopeful? As a Palestinian said, we have to be hopeful, but it's not a strategy. There is no doubt Palestinians are very, very well aware of politics, and it's quite depressing and revealing when I've had Palestinians say, look, James, we understand the level of outpouring of, support for us around the world, but it's still matched by impunity, and we know that international humanitarian law doesn't apply to us. So Palestinians are no fools when it comes to the perilous position they're in, but there's not a single person you talk to tonight, even though they know it seems far away, who would not be holding on. They have nothing else to hold on to because, as we know, not only does it mean an end to bombardments, it apparently means that aid will only flow if there is a ceasefire. So they know that their sustenance, their survival is linked to that as well. What else could member states have done? So much. UNICEF, we have the benefit of being a frontline organisation. We talk to those in power and we have conversations with organisations like yours who clearly care. But member states have many tools in their toolkit, and I think what's important here is that this is not a nice principle to have. On a practical level, member states, if they're aware that a fellow member state is committing grave violations against children, then they bear a responsibility to uphold international law and to ensure they have no political, diplomatic, financial, military support. That hasn't been happening, and Palestinians are losing because of that. And it worries me greatly because international humanitarian law is something for generations that's helped all of us around the world.
James Elder, really great to have you here in person and not just be talking to you whilst you're dealing with all of this in Gaza. Thank you so much. Now, on Monday, we spoke to UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. She accused companies of profiteering from Israel's war in Gaza. Now she's being targeted by the United States. Here's just a reminder of what she told us on the night.
The military sector and other parts of the private sector have really profiteered from what has happened, like the weapon industry, the tech industry, have not only helped Israel carry out the destructive assault that it has unleashed against Gaza, but have helped the stock exchange of Israel rise of 179%.
That's Francesca Albanese talking to me there and writing on social media. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says, today I'm imposing sanctions on UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese for her illegitimate and shameful efforts to prompt international criminal court action against US and Israeli companies, officials and executives. Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel will no longer be tolerated. We will always stand by our partners in their right to self-defence. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, a shared priority. Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron discuss ways to tackle channel crossings. Plus, the latest from Ukraine as Russia launches its largest drone attack of the war so far.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
Welcome back to the programme. Let's focus now on that so-called one-in, one-out migrant deal being negotiated between two leaders. We don't know the full details yet. That will come in a joint news conference with French President Emmanuel Macron and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer tomorrow. But the suggestion is France would take back a so far unspecified number of migrants who arrive in small boats, and in return, the UK would accept a similar number of asylum seekers from France. We just wanted to understand why the UK is so attractive. So we've been asking migrants at a camp in Dunkirk why they make the dangerous and perilous journey. And I'll be speaking to a Spanish politician to get a sense of how this one-in, one-out plan is going down with the rest of Europe. But first, this report from Sky's political correspondent, Rob Powell.
Eager for images of a firm friendship, but this visit about more than the usual photo call. In the British Museum, history all around, but the battles of the past now long forgotten.
In this new world, our alliances are, in my view, more important than ever. The strength and solidarity of countries that share the same values, the same aims, the same hope for the future.
The French president pulling the UK close.
We are totally committed to this work in common, hand in hand, to be sure that the United Kingdom and France will put their energy to build, let's say, a better place, a better world.
Back in Downing Street, some pomp, but policy too.
Will you do a deal on migration, Mr President?
So Keir Starmer could really do with some progress on illegal migration during this state visit, given small boat crossings are at record highs. But there's plenty of politics on the French side too, with Emmanuel Macron wanting the UK to do more to tackle some of the pull factors that bring migrants to the French coast in the first place.
So beyond the wide smiles and warm words,
I feel this relationship is as strong as it's ever been between our countries.
Discussions on a one-in, one-out migrant returns deal appear more fraught, the French president balancing this relationship with his other EU commitments.
What I think the Spanish and the Italians and others are saying to the French is, don't forget, this is not simply a matter between you and the UK. There's a wider European bunch of issues here, which are regularly discussed, of course, within the EU and between individual countries.
More likely is an announcement on new police tactics that would mean French officers intercepting overloaded boats while they're in shallow water, like this one filmed to the south of Calais last week. But Emmanuel Macron knows his opposite number wants more, the Prime Minister trying to squeeze political benefit from this personal relationship. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Well, at the centre of the political negotiations are people who've come from all around the world to escape conflict or repression or to seek a better life. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons has been to a migrant camp in Dunkirk to hear why so many people are set on crossing the Channel. Have a look.
As Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron meet, there is an inescapable problem for the British Prime Minister, because he will want to put cross-channel migration, small boats, right at the top of the agenda. It is a huge political issue in Britain. For Macron, not so. The average French voter doesn't really care about the boats leaving these beaches and heading over to the shores of England. Why? Well, for one thing, France accepts a lot more asylum seekers already than Britain, about 5 times as many, so there isn't a wave of sympathy for the plight of the Brits. And the second thing is that this is an issue that really only affects this stretch of northern France. If you live in Calais or Dunkirk, yes, it concerns you, but for most of the rest of the nation, it's immaterial. They don't see the thousands of people who come to this region intent on just one thing, and that is getting over there to Britain. Now, a question that comes up a lot is why? Why would so many people come from around the world, travel through Europe, come to this region just to cross the Channel? So we went to one of the migrant camps that's dotted around Dunkirk to ask people why they were there.
In England, they can give me an opportunity, like, to succeed or to do whatever that I need to do in my life. Like, I can go to school. I believe that I can find that I can continue with my school.
I want to help your family. I want to live with the peace, because with country no peace, no anything. Problem every time, kill people, kill children.
People of Britain go to good life, good work, good paper. Safety Palestinian in Britain.
It's safe. If the French and British do a deal, it's probably going to revolve around Britain pushing France for more policing along these shores, to take firmer action. For instance, to wade into the water to try to stop boats before they leave. And that may well be something that Emmanuel Macron entertains. But at the same time, he has to worry about other European nations. If he signs up to this idea of one out and one in, and asylum seekers being returned to France, well, there'll be other nations who worry that they could end up being returned right back to the country in which they first entered Europe. That might be Greece or Italy or Malta, and those countries are adamant that they are not prepared to look after all the people rejected by Britain and France. And the other thing is that there are plenty of politicians in France who think that Britain is the problem, that Britain is too inviting to migrants, that it doesn't have an ID card scheme, that it allows people too easily to enter the black market. Macron can't sign up to a deal that he can't sell to the French public. Exactly the same problem that Keir Starmer's got.
That was Adam Parsons there in Dunkirk. Well, we've been talking so far about those who make it to the shores of northern France and onto a boat bound for the UK. But over 21,000 people crossed the English Channel this year, with the figures suggesting 2025 will be a record year for small boat arrivals. But many more travel to the continent. These are some of the routes through the southern border that migrants have been using to get into the EU. Specific countries such as Italy, Greece, Spain, Malta and Cyprus have been the main point of entry. Nearly 58,000 people travelled to those nations in 2025. So far this year, over 70,000 migrants have entered countries right across Europe. Well, I'm joined now by Juan Fernando Lopez Aguilar, a Spanish MEP and member of the EU Working Group on Asylum. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to get your point of view on this British Franco migration plan and deal, because we know that countries like Spain have been critical of it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a very good thing that the UK relationship with the EU in all has been reset and is underway. And it goes with the bilateral relationship with individual member states, most importantly France, which is a neighboring country for the UK through the Channel. And yes, the Channel happens to be an affluent migratory route, just comparable when it comes to number with the Atlantic road through the Canaries to the European Union. I'm a Canarian myself, and to the Canaries we receive 40,000 a year, and more than that, 10,000 perish in the attempt. Migration is a fact, and then asylum is a right. We have to tell the difference between migrants and asylum seekers. But as to European law, France is bound by European law. We have done everything to finally put in place EU legislation when it comes to migration and EU legislation when it comes to asylum. But it only happens that it's the most divisive issue in the European agenda by far. Most divisive.
So basically,
it's divisive geographically, politically, ideologically, and yes, it takes architecture, it takes long-standing, it takes long-run views in order to handle the migratory facts.
Are you saying basically that, look, it's great that these relations are being reset and strengthened, but, you know, basically telling the French, don't leave us out of any kind of agreement that you come up with?
Well, there are fields of action in which French can actually agree with the UK in order to put some order in the disarray in the Channel, and most importantly, to make their very best in order to save as many lives as possible, because they are putting their lives at risk. So it tells you some of the despair behind, and of course, of the hope of so many people trying to make it one way or the other, and mostly resorting to trafficking, illicit trafficking of human beings and smuggling. That's part of the phenomenon. So there is a field which is to be tackled in the so-called countries of transit and origin, and there is a field that has to be tackled on the spot. That is the Channel. So yes, patrolling the Channel and maritime search and rescue, saving as many lives as possible is part of the thing to do. But yes, cooperation between enforcement, law enforcement authorities, both by France and the UK, is part of the deal which is to be struck. It only goes without saying that it has to be consistent with the European standards.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, both France and the UK are part of the Council of Europe and are bound by the jurisprudence of the European Court of Rights when it comes to respecting the European Convention of Human Rights.
So what do you want, you know, what would you like to see happen here? Because, as you say, this has been an ongoing issue for decades. And we continue to see large numbers of migrants make their way, you know, to Europe, but through the Channel as well. And governments and their constituents want a solution to this.
Yes, let me tell you that I'm well aware that European public opinion are most concerned about the impact of migration in the social fabrics of individual member states, including the UK and France and Spain and all of them. But I can tell you too that as we speak now, at least 72 million human beings are on the move, trying to make escape from the country where they were born, because they think they don't belong anymore to that country. They're looking for hope or fleeing despair or warfare or oppression. So only a tiny proportion of those millions are aiming Europe. We shouldn't panic. We can handle, as long as we stand by our EU law, as long as we stand by EU values, as long as we respect our commitment to human rights, as long as we do the right thing, we can handle it. But it takes a lot of cooperation, long-run investment, resources, and of course, mutual trust. We have made our best to put in place an architecture, a long-standing architecture based on two principles: shared responsibility and binding solidarity, because it takes a lot of solidarity between member states of the European Union in order precisely to avoid panicking.
And is it, so I've got about 45 seconds, but is it working? You say that there's these long-standing policies and architecture. Is it working, or do you believe it needs to be?
It has to work. We have actually legislated on the matter, and we have given 2 years for the member states in order to elevate the so-called solidarity pledge and implementation plans as to the Migration and Asylum Pact to the European Commission. So we are on the track of implementing the new EU legal architecture. It binds France, but it should also make a difference when it comes to the bilateral relation with such an important, huge partner as the UK happens to be.
Mr. Lopez Aguilar, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
I thank you for having me.
Now let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who joins me here now. And John, there's a lot of talk about this one-in, one-out policy. It also feels very much like we are back to the future in terms of, you know, another British government trying to come up with some kind of solution here?
Well, the Prime Minister, of course, has talked about smashing the gangs. Stop the boats was a Conservative slogan, and it's clearly one of the top priorities for Sir Keir Starmer. It's the top priority when it comes to his talks with President Macron. Now, after their talks in Downing Street, Number 10 put out a pretty lengthy statement, 8 paragraphs, talking about the need to go further than what's happened already and make progress on what they called new and innovative solutions. And this is the key bit, including a new deterrent to break the business model of these gangs. Now, that is exactly what the one in, one out scheme is designed to do. It's supposed to create a deterrent by showing illegal immigrants that they can expect their asylum claim to be rejected when they arrive in the UK, and then they get sent back to France. Now, the reason there doesn't seem to be a deal, or at least there wasn't this afternoon, a deal yet, they're arguing about the numbers. And the reason they're arguing about the numbers is that there are reports in France, they began these reports, that the numbers who actually be sent back, not very many. In fact, there's a French report which has suggested Britain would only send back 50 migrants a week under a trial of the scheme. So that means about 2,600 a year, according to these French reports. However, of course, more than 44,000 migrants have arrived in the UK since the general election. So the Conservatives and other opposition parties in the UK will say, well, that's hopeless, that's no good, that's not really one in, one out, and because, in fact, it's only around 1 in 17 migrants who'd actually be sent back. So clearly, the British government is really trying to get those numbers up so that it looks like a good deal. The danger for the Prime Minister is that if the numbers are not good, it won't look like a good deal and he'll be deeply frustrated. They're also talking about other moves, for example, more arrests and so on, policing, as Adam Parsons was describing there. But clearly there's a lot riding on this for the Prime Minister. If he can get a good deal, then that'll be a big political boost. But if he fails, and of course, remember all the problems the Conservatives have with Rwanda, and that was deemed to be a flop, certainly by the Labour Party, then he will be in trouble. And all this talk about getting a good deal will come to nothing.
John, thank you as always. Now, the issue of asylum seekers features on this week's The World podcast, where Richard Engel and I speak about a crackdown on undocumented workers in Iran. Just have a listen.
What is it, 4 million Afghans who are living in Iran, many of them undocumented. You know, they do labor and things like that. And they're the ones being scapegoated. So the story in Iran is the Israelis used this vulnerable community, recruited spies. They were able to infiltrate drones into the country, infiltrate Mossad agents, and that they were a fifth column. But they're blaming Afghans and they're rounding them up as fast as they can and unceremoniously just booting them out of the country.
I've asked the Israeli intelligence agency, senior figures, whether there is some truth to that. And they said that there's plenty of Iranians who hate this regime that we can work with. We don't need to tap into a vulnerable community.
That was the World podcast, and you can scan the QR code on your screen now for the full episode of The World, or you can find it wherever you get your podcast. That's Apple or Spotify. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we report from Marseille after wildfires burnt through the suburbs of the French city.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Emergency crews in Marseille are battling a wildfire that reached the outskirts of France's second largest city, injuring more than 100 people and destroying dozens of homes. Firefighters have pushed the blaze back, but it's not being extinguished. Our science correspondent is in the port city and sent this report.
The wildfire swept into the suburbs of Marseille and consumed everything in its path. Houses reduced to rubble, vehicles to twisted metal. The flames so fierce and moving so fast that residents were fortunate to escape with their lives. Helicopters and firefighting aircraft have dropped hundreds of tons of water, trying to stop flames from advancing further into France's second largest city. More than 60 homes have been burnt so far. John and his young family watched the blaze come within 100 metres of his home, their bags packed in case they had to flee.
Everywhere, it's like it was fog, there was a mist, the clouds were black, smoke everywhere. We had up to 1-2 centimeters of soot, of ashes on our balconies, on our terrace, everywhere. Pool was completely black. So this is the first time this is ever happening. So it was a big shock. My son was at some point crying, and I had to tell him, calm down, the world is not ending yet. So that's how bad it got. But we are happy that this is all over. Yesterday was a nightmare, I would say, but now we are waking from that bad dream.
Some areas had a lucky escape. Flames raced down the slopes towards La Castellane, miraculously skirting the edge of some houses and coming to a halt just the width of a road from apartment blocks.
This is the very edge of the advancing flames, the blaze. You can see the scorched leaves. Now, if they had actually burnt and swept on further down the hill, you've got many people who live down here. This was an intense fire, which has certainly died down today, but it is not over. There is big concern that the winds that whipped up the flames yesterday could return and reignite what has been a truly terrifying wildfire.
There are now several wildfires in the region. A marathon heatwave and weeks without a drop of rain have left the ground tinder dry. And while strong winds fan the flames, firefighters struggle to bring them under control.
Il est en nette régression, mais il peut y avoir des reprises.
This is now clearly decreasing, but there could be restarts. Obviously, we're hoping for better weather conditions, but we remain extremely vigilant. Hundreds of firefighters were mobilised all night long and are still now on several fronts. Some residents lost everything they had, but we will be there to help them get some financial aid to recover from all of this.
Wildfires are not unusual in the south of France, but it's rare for them to encroach into urban areas. And people living on the edge of towns and cities may well now feel vulnerable with a long, dry summer ahead. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Marseille.
Now, Russia has targeted Ukraine with a huge aerial bombardment, with officials saying 728 drones and more than a dozen missiles were used in the attack. The city of Lutsk in the country's northwest was the hardest hit. Located near the border with Poland, it's home to airfields used by the military and serves as a crucial hub for receiving foreign aid. Ukraine's military says it successfully shot down almost all of the drones, but some of the missiles have caused damage. Well, Moscow has been intensifying both its aerial and ground assaults on Ukraine over recent weeks. The attack comes at a time of uncertainty over the supply of crucial US weapons and as Donald Trump's peace efforts appear to have stalled. Just hours earlier, the US president said he's not happy with Vladimir Putin and criticised him for killing a lot of people. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, how the Lionesses have bounced back at the Euros.
I'm Anna Botting. Coming up on Sky News at 10, two major inquiries. The first into the Southport attack, the second into the infected blood scandal. Plus, Starmer and Macron's talks at Downing Street. All that and more. See you at 10.
Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok.
We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
We arrive, a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. The Lionesses have recovered from a shaky start to the Euros in Switzerland tonight, thrashing the Netherlands 4-0 to avoid being knocked out of the competition in the group stage. Well, let's bring in our Rob Harris, who joins us from Zurich. And Rob, the Lionesses thrashing the Netherlands.
Yes, and here at the Lionesses Fan HQ, they're still celebrating into the night, having come to the stadium here in Zurich. There was so much pressure on the team. They lost to France the other night, but where they were sloppy in that game, they were sublime against the Netherlands. And we can take a look now through the goals, and they're still celebrating. The first goal came from Lauren James. It was 21 minutes into the first half. The Chelsea forward blasted the ball through right into the top right-hand corner, easing those nerves, but it did take right the way into injury time at the end of the first half for the second to come. Came from Georgia Stanway. It was another sublime strike from outside the box from the Bayern Munich midfielder to ensure they had that two-goal cushion going in at the break. Then at the start of the second half, there was a bit of VAR disappointment, England having a goal ruled out, until on the hour, Lauren James was on target again, receiving the cross from Lauren Hemp and securing her second of the night. And then they could really start to enjoy themselves. On 67th minute came the fourth goal from the Manchester United midfielder Ella Toone, and That was a third assist too from Alessia Russo, all delighting the England faithful, particularly Serena Wiegman, the manager, who felt so much tension going into this match. It means that a win in the final match on Sunday in the group against Wales should put them through to the quarter-finals, and now the defending champions are finally looking like champions again after all those doubts were raised about their performance. As for Wales, they're in action at the moment against France, coming to the final stages of their match. They did concede early to France, but then managed to get an equaliser. Jess Fishlock, their most capped player of all time, their all-time top scorer, did manage to get a first ever goal for Wales at a women's tournament. But then France really turned on the style again, and entering the final seconds of that match, France are leading 4-1, and they're about to make it 2 wins out of 2 in the group here at the Women's Euros.
Yeah, Rob, we're into extra time, I believe, in the Wales match.
Yeah, we're just in injury time. So many of the England fans here actually celebrating Wales goals. They're cheering for Wales. It might not always seem like that in terms of the British rivalry, but they're certainly rooting for them here. So it is a mountain to climb for Wales, obviously, but they've got that memorable goal. They've never qualified for a women's tournament before, so just getting that goal will be a slither of something to celebrate, particularly for Jess Fishlock, who has been a stalwart of this team over so many years. At the age of 38, finally getting a major tournament for her. But Wales will be losing a second game out of 2 here, which means there's nothing to play for them apart from pride going into that game against England on Sunday. Of course, though, they could stop England progressing if potentially they were to beat England in that match. But England have been playing here in Zurich, Wales across in St Gallen, and we are just approaching the end of that game with France leading 4-1 on top of that 2-1 victory over England in the group on Saturday. Certainly been an impressive start for France, who have never actually won a major women's trophy.
Rob, thank you as always, and I can see all the celebrations going on behind you. Well, that's it from the team and me here this evening. We'll be back again tomorrow. The news at 10 with Anna is next. Good night.